Conditions May Apply by CinnamonPinecones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 52. Catch and Release. Izuku woke up to the sound of arguing coming from another room. Another room? He shot up quicker than he had in a long time. For a terrifying split second, he had no idea where he was or who he was with. The fear didn't abate much once the memories of last night flooded back to him. His hands shot up to his face. Oh, ow. Their mask was still on, and they were starting to develop pressure sores where it pressed into their face. Well, as uncomfortable as it was, that was a good sign. It likely hadn't been removed while they were sleeping. Their leg was in a splint, and it still hurt, but not nearly as much as it did last night. It looked like it had been propped up before they whipped themselves practically off the couch. Wait, what was going on down the hall? They did their best to tune in to the conversation. Barged into your house last night. Let me cook breakfast for you, woman. That sounded like Eraser. What the hell was going on? No one visits me unless they're on death's doorstep. I never get the chance to cook for anyone. Get your panties out of a twist and sit down, Shota. And that sounded like Recovery Girl. Shota? Was that Eraser's name? Eraser was on a first name basis with Recovery Girl? What the hell was going on? Their life was so freaking weird. They heard noises that sounded like Eraser was getting hit with a spatula. Oh, they had to see this. Checking that their mask was still in place, they hobbled over to what they assumed was the kitchen, and sure enough, Eraser was getting bullied into a chair by a spatula-wielding old woman a third of his size. They couldn't help but laugh at the sight, and both of them whipped their head up at the sound. Oh, good morning, dearie. Please take a seat. You shouldn't be walking around quite yet, she greeted, and pushed them toward a chair far more gently than she did with Eraser. Eraserhead shot him a glare from across the table before he spoke. How long have you been there? He asked. Couple seconds, they responded honestly. What did you hear? He asked, eyeing them suspiciously. Stop interrogating guests at my table, Shota. You told me you weren't bringing dangerous criminals to my house. They're not going to kill you by knowing your first name, Recovery Girl recalled over her shoulder. Eraser shifted his glare toward her. And quit glaring at me, she added. Eraser just scowled and turned away, and Ivy couldn't help but laugh again. It was like he was being chided by his mother. Will you eat, Ivy? I'm making enough for all of us, she offered. Suddenly the situation wasn't so funny. They trailed off. They didn't want to be rude and refuse her food, and it smelled delicious, but they couldn't just take their mask off and eat in front of them, no matter how much they wanted to. It was nice here. It was comfortable. It had the same kind of warmth in the air that the Shinso's house did. You can eat in the living room, kid, Eraser piped up. Recovery Girl whipped her head around to argue, but let out a giggle when she saw them. Oh, yes, I forgot about the whole secret identity thing. You can do whatever you're comfortable with, dear, she conceded as she went back to cooking. Yes, that would be nice. Thank you, Recovery Girl-san, he said with a bow, even though her back was turned. Oh, just call me Chio or Shuzenji, dearie. There's no need for all of that in my own house. I get enough of it at work, she dismissed. Oh, okay, never mind. This wasn't funny at all anymore. They'd never been more uncomfortable in their life. They glanced over to Eraser, who was looking back at them with an amused smirk. When they shot him a look, he laughed at them. A hole? They kicked his shin under the table. The slight flinch he gave was incredibly satisfying. I've got rice and miso cooking. Is that all right with you, Ivy? She asked. Oh, Kami, she was so nice. They felt like they were going to vomit. Yeah, that sounds great, they stuttered out. Damn it, that freaking stutter was going to blow their whole act. Eraser was still wearing an amused expression, so they kicked him in the shin again, even harder, and the flinch was no less satisfying the second time. Suddenly, Eraser's expression dropped. He went stiff, stood up, and pulled his phone out of his pocket. It must have been ringing because he answered a phone call before making it to exit the kitchen. They could hear vague shouting on the other end of the phone from the other side of the room, and Eraser winced and pulled the phone away from his ear. That's all they heard before he rounded the corner out of sight, but Recovery Girl was giggling to herself over at the stove. What was what? They floundered, trying to ask what the hell was going on. Recovery Girl just started laughing harder and said, Don't worry about it, dear. Everything's fine. Shoto, where the hell are you? Hizashi screamed over the phone. Damn, his ear was ringing from just the little phone speaker trying to imitate their actual volume. He walked out of hearing range from the kitchen as quickly as possible before responding, Zashi, I'm fine. Everything is fine. I'm at Chio's. Why are you at Chio's if everything is fine? They demanded. Zashi, quit yelling. The neighbors are going to file a complaint. I'm sorry I didn't text you last night. It was a mess and it slipped my mind. He admitted. Show, that doesn't explain what happened. He barked back at a more reasonable volume. I might have broken Ivy's leg? The line went deathly quiet. It was an accident. They fell off the roof and they fell off a roof! He interrupted again. I said, everything's fine. Calm down. Yes, there was ice on the ledge and they slipped. I didn't know there was a fire escape below them, so I looped my scarf around their ankle and swung them shin first into the railing. But they're okay. Chio's about to force feed us breakfast. I don't know when I'll be home. They still need another round of healing. She said it probably won't knock them out again, but I need to stick around. The kid's really uncomfortable here. Or at least they were last night. They seem to be better this morning. The line went quiet again after the explanation. You're sleeping on the couch, they threatened in a deadpan voice. Mm-hmm. Whatever you say, Zashi, he replied sarcastically. They never followed through on that threat. If I ever wake up and you're not here with no explanation again, you better hope that you're in the hospital, because if you aren't, I will put you there. They amended their threat. That was only slightly less of an empty threat. He hadn't seen Zashi truly angry many times, but when they were, it was a sight to behold, and he had no desire to be on the receiving end of that wrath. Yeah, okay, that's fair. I gotta get back, though. I don't want to leave them alone too long, he replied. So, how did you two meet? Ivy attempted to make small talk. Oh, Shota's very secretive about his personal life. I don't know how much he'd want me telling you, but I've known him since he was a teenager, and we've been colleagues of a sort for many years now, she explained. They couldn't imagine Eraser as a teenager. They couldn't imagine him as anything other than what he was. In their mind, he just spawned into existence one day exactly as he is. Since he was a teenager, ha, You got any embarrassing stories? They badgered. She scoffed and shook her head. Of course I do. Too many to count. That boy was always throwing himself around and breaking his bones with that commie forsaken scarf of his. He'd come puttering over to me at least once a week for something or another, she reminisced. Ivy couldn't help but laugh at that. Eraserhead was always so graceful. They'd never seen him stumble. Of course, he had to practice to get that good at things, but picturing him eating dirt and then crying to Recovery Girl was very funny. What the hell are you two laughing about? The man in question asked from the doorway. Nothing, dearie, nothing. They responded at the same time before glancing at one another and laughing even harder. What did you tell them, Chio? He demanded. Nothing you need to worry about, dear. Go take your seat. I'm nearly finished, she dismissed with a final chuckle. Eraser eyed both of them suspiciously, but headed toward his seat regardless. Was that who I thought it was, Shota? She asked. He responded, giving no further context. She giggled like they just shared an inside joke that Eraser didn't find all that funny. Well, they've got impeccable timing. Breakfast is ready. Did you want to eat in the living room, Ivy? It would do you good to get your energy up. I've still got to heal you fully, but this round shouldn't take quite so much out of you, she explained. Yes, yeah, please, they said awkwardly, but at least they did it without stuttering again. They got to their feet, and both Recovery Girl and Eraser cringed and stepped forward like they were actually falling over. They just froze and looked back and forth between the two of them with wide eyes. Dear, you shouldn't be putting weight on that yet. Shota, help them to the living room, she commanded as she set the pots of miso and rice she was carrying on the dining table. I'm fine, guys. They tried to assuage their worries. You've still got the equivalent of a hairline fracture. You are certainly not fine. Recovery Girl insisted, and she shooed them out of the room. It did hurt a bit still, but their level of concern was making them uncomfortable. They got here fine. They could get back fine, but they had the feeling arguing with Recovery Girl wasn't going to get them anywhere, so they let Eraser pull their arm over his shoulders and lead them back to the living room. This was too much, but the less they argued, the sooner it would be over. They settled back onto the couch without complaint and thanked Recovery Girl profusely when she brought their breakfast to them herself. Kami, she was so nice, and they didn't know how to respond. It was like when he first met the Shinsos. Unbearably awkward. They waited until they heard the two of them settle down in the kitchen before looking around the room, giving a thorough sweep to make sure that there were no security cameras or anything. They even went so far as to shine their flashlight around to look for a reflective lens. When they were satisfied that there was nothing, they turned their back to the direction of the kitchen and took off their mask. The miso was lukewarm at this point, but it was still delicious. They scarfed down as much as they could, as quickly as they could, and rubbed at the pressure sores developing on their face for a minute before shoving their mask back into place. Looking at the dirty bowl in front of them was driving them mad. Every manner they had ever been taught was screaming at them to go wash it or bring it to the sink at the very least. But they had a feeling Recovery Girl wouldn't appreciate them hobbling over there again. It was taunting them, just sitting there on the coffee table while they stared at it as if they could will it clean and back into the cupboard. They just sat there bouncing their good leg incessantly while they stewed in their anxiety. You done, Ivy? Eraser called from down the hall. They nearly jumped out of their skin because they were so hyper focused on their stupid dishes. Yeah, they peeped out. Damn it, with this freaking stutter again. They needed to pull themselves together. It was just some dishes. You okay, kid? He asked as he walked into the room. Yeah, I'm fine, they replied quickly. He must have seen the way Ivy's gaze kept getting caught on the dishes because he scooped them up without a word and turned back to the kitchen. Thanks, they stuttered out as he left. Hell, he could deal with a hostage situation with more social grace than this. His brain was so busted. A few minutes later, he came back with Recovery Girl in tow. Okay, now I'm going to check and make sure that everything is still in place after all your walking around. It's going to hurt, but only for a moment. Then, assuming everything's in order, I'll finish you up and you'll be right as rain, but probably a little groggy for the rest of the day. You two had better stay home and rest tonight, but by tomorrow you can go throwing yourselves around the rooftops like lunatics again, she explained, and poked with no real heat. She paused and looked at them after that, so they quickly nodded. All right, I'm going to feel around and then use my quirk. Why don't you sit back? She suggested. It certainly didn't feel good to have her prodding around their leg again, but they just sat still. They shouldn't make this any more difficult than it needed to be. She planted a smooch on their leg, and suddenly it felt like they'd just run a marathon. Kami, that felt strange. They're pretty sure they just passed out immediately last time. At least they hoped they did because they couldn't remember anything past the simultaneously dulled and searing pain of their bones grinding back into position. Their eyelids felt like they weighed 10 tons, and they were thoroughly slumped back into the couch. Everything feel all right, dearie? It should be fully healed now, Recovery Girl asked. They flexed their leg around. It felt fine. Incredibly heavy, but fine. Yeah, it feels fine, they confirmed. Could you stand up and walk around on it for me just to make sure? I've done this plenty of times in the field without an x-ray, but it certainly isn't ideal. If it feels off, you might have to get an x-ray to make sure everything's in place. It felt like a clean break, but there's no way to be sure without a scan, she explained. They got up with a yawn and a muffled groan, and Eraser had the audacity to laugh at them. Recovery Girl decked him in the shin with her cane faster than Ivy could even think about retaliating. They tried their best not to laugh hysterically at the face he pulled when she did that, but it was ultimately a fruitless attempt. Holy heck, how much of a punch did she pack in with that thing? Eraser hardly even flinched when they kicked him under the table earlier. You did this, Shota. You don't get to laugh at them, she chided. After a couple of laps around the couch and assuring her that everything was fine, she only made them promise twice that they would have Eraser bring them back if something started to feel off before she bid them both farewell and slipped a bag of sweets into their hands. Where did those even come from? The second the door closed behind them, they shot him a look. How the hell are you and Recovery Girl on a first name basis? They demanded. He just rolled his eyes at them as they walked towards the nearest bus stop. She said she's known you since you were a teenager. You weren't even a pro yet. Wait. They cut themselves off with a dramatic gasp. Did you go to UA? They asked, aghast. When he just continued walking without answering, they grabbed him by the arm and shook him. Oh, you totally did, didn't you? You fancy ass bastard. What year did you graduate? You had to have competed in the sports festival, right? I'm finding that immediately. Did you make it to the 1v1s? Did someone kick your ass on live television? Well, you certainly got your energy back quick. He finally spoke up. Wait a damn minute. She said you've been colleagues of a sort for years now, and you said you've got a day job teaching brats how to fight. Eraser, do you teach? They were cut off by a swift open palm to the mask. Ow! Damn, that hurt. This thing's been on for like over 18 hours, dude. They whined but lowered their voice anyway. You work at UA, don't you? His lack of response was all the confirmation they needed. Oh, Kami, you do. What do you teach? Heroics, obviously, right? Damn, I'm getting some Ivy League education over here. They paused and gave him a look to let the joke really sink in. He did not laugh. You get it? Because in America, the fancy schools, yes, I get it. It was just a terrible joke, he interrupted. And my name is Ivy. They continued explaining as if they hadn't heard him at all. You have a terrible sense of humor. They finally gave up. So I've been told, he said as they made it to the bus stop. You're not going north, are you? Southbound isn't gonna be here for another 45 minutes, they pointed out. No, I'm just gonna walk. Do you have enough for fare back to Uptown? He asked. They very much did not. They didn't have a single yen on them, in fact. No, I was just gonna walk. They trailed off. Ivy, that would take hours, he shot back. Got nothing better to do, they claimed. Just because you have the energy to be obnoxious doesn't mean you have the energy to walk clear to the other side of the city. Bus is coming around the corner right now. I'll tap you in, he said. Before they could argue, the bus pulled up and he bullied them through the door. They didn't even get their wits about them enough to say thanks before the doors shut and the bus started to drive away. They just sunk into a seat at the very back in an attempt to draw the least amount of attention they could, which was difficult considering it was like 10 a.m. on a Sunday and they were wearing a clunky metal face mask, black eyeshadow to rival a raccoon, and a pair of pants that were split up the leg past the knee, but only on one side. Yeah, they were definitely going to get some weird looks. End of chapter.